VCT, CDL, FNCS, ALGS, TI, RLCS. If you know what every one of those abbreviations stands for, you probably need a shower.
This guy stinks!
It seems like every game that comes out these days has a premier multi-million-dollar global championship before most people even figure out how to get out of gold. But it wasn't always like this. Esports used to be built from the ground up by the communities who played these games daily. A truly grassroots scene organizing tournaments with just passion and duct tape. But now, publishers are calling the shots with multi-million-dollar budgets, huge international tournaments, and now an esports World Cup that promises to elevate the scene to heights it's never seen before. But how do all these tournaments work? Why do some games try to emulate real-world sports while others have something else going on entirely? In other words, why does every esports tournament seem to operate completely differently? And where did Grassroots Esports go? If you're an esports fan, a quick reminder about the like and subscribe buttons, by the way. Esports tournaments can vary widely in the way that they operate, from one-off tournaments run by a small community to tournament organizers that make a living running third-party tournament series to the big leagues and publisher-backed world championship series that are becoming the norm in the 2020s. Let's start with developer-controlled ecosystems and Valve, who takes an open approach to this model with CS2's open circuit system. Now, only twice a year are the majors. These are as official as international tournaments get, but they are still operated by third parties, and qualifications are done through the Valve-sponsored regional major ranking system. Teams who qualify through the RMR go on to the international majors. But in order to qualify for the RMRs, you'll need to earn points from main events, and there's a lot of them. With tournament operators like PGL, Perfect World, Blast, ESL, and DreamHack maintaining main events throughout the year, it's through these tournaments that teams earn points and rankings on HLTV. This open system has led to some amazing storylines, with teams popping up from all over the world. No matter where you're from or how popular you are, if you're good at CS, you can win it all. With Dota 2, you can see the same active yet decentralized approach. The only real difference being that Valve actually directly manages and organizes TI, the biggest Dota 2 tournament of the year. But as for everything else, all of the year's big ticket tourneys are run by third parties, in the same way that CS2 does, utilizing open, points-based qualifications. Now let's talk about the closed model with Fortnite and Epic Games. With Fortnite, Epic took almost the exact opposite approach when it comes to what a truly developer-controlled ecosystem looks like. With Epic's system, everyone can compete, but the entire system is built into the game, with no need for third-party tournament operators. Play through the in-game qualification system, get through the group stages, and qualify for the major. The format has changed over the years, but Epic has had a few years to really make this system robust. That doesn't mean that there isn't a deeper ecosystem, though. There's still plenty of third-party tournaments, but Epic has very clear guidelines on how to differentiate these from officials, by requiring tournament organizers to use language like featuring Fortnite to maintain a distinction from the main events. Other examples of these types of developer-controlled ecosystems are Halo, PUBG, Apex Legends, Rainbow Six Siege, and all the others that you're typing in the comments right now. It all exists somewhere in between the total control that Epic has and the mostly hands-off approach that Valve does. Now let's look at the most divisive approach to esports, franchising and partner models. And let's start by talking about Valorant's incredibly structured competitive scene. At the very top is the Valorant Champions Tour, where since 2023, partnered organizations compete in official VCT tournaments to earn points towards the main Champions event at the end of the year. In previous years, the format worked a little different, but the key components remain the same. Qualify in your regional tournament, play in the Masters event, win the big bucks. But now let's talk about how you become a partnered team in the first place. Because when it comes down to it, you can't have a sustainable Tier 1 without a functioning Tier 2. And in Tier 2 Valorant, qualified teams play in their region's Challengers League events, those regions being Pacific, Americas, EMEA, and China, and compete in officially sanctioned but third-party operated Challengers League tournaments. Through these, teams earn points for the main tournament in Tier 2, Ascension. And the winning team of the Ascension tournament for each region is promoted to a VCT partner team. Remember how I said only qualified teams can play in Tier 2 Valorant? That's because to qualify into Tier 2, you have to play through Premier. That's right, just like Fortnite, the actual qualifiers to the professional esports circuit exist right in the game client itself. Teams that win in the Premier Invite division are invited to play in the Challengers League events. With this system being so closed off, third-party tournaments do exist, but outside of a few official off-season events, tournament organizers are pretty much on their own to support the Tier 3 scene. Now, let's talk about League of Legends, arguably the most iconic esport to exist. At the height of it all is the League of Legends World Championship, or Worlds. Unlike Valorant's partner system, League has operated on a franchise model since 2018, but still splits into regions. As of 2025, these regions are LCK, LEC, LTA, LCP, and LPL. Once franchised, these teams don't have to worry about relegation, but here's the kicker. Unlike Valorant's promotion system, until 2025, there has not been a direct path for amateur teams to reach franchise leagues. This has led to some tensions over the years, but that doesn't mean that Riot has been ignoring this though. And in 2025, the new Tier 2 format will actually feed into a guest slot, where teams who win in these official Tier 2 tournaments will actually be able to compete in the main season tournaments like MSI and Worlds. This is huge because these leagues used to only act as a proving ground for players hoping to get signed by franchise teams. But after the aforementioned backlash in previous years, it's shifting directions. That section was really long, so I'm going to pick up the pace here a little bit. Let's dive into OWL. The Overwatch League launched in 2018 as a city-based franchise model where teams paid $20 million plus for permanent spots. The league followed traditional sports structures with home and away games, structured regular season and playoffs, and even offered revenue sharing between the teams. This was great for players and revolutionary even, offering them minimum player salaries and benefits. However, the model faced a lot of challenges, and by 2023, the league effectively collapsed, with Blizzard announcing the end of the franchise model. Last year in 2024, we saw OWCS, which is continuing into 2025 as well, featuring open qualifiers to promotion into the OWCS circuit. The Call of Duty League followed a similar franchise model to Overwatch League, launching in 2020 with 12 teams paying top dollar, reportedly $25 million each for permanent spots in the franchise. And while the CDL is still operated in a franchise model in 2025, it has faced its own challenges, including declining viewership and questions about long-term sustainability, boiling into a lawsuit from a few of the teams last year over Activision Blizzard's, and I quote, unlawful monopoly over the CDL. Given the high tensions, the CDL has had to adapt its format multiple times to address the issues, adding quite a few top dollar off-season events and bringing minor tournaments into the CDL as well. With CDL, there still isn't a path to pro, but Challengers events are well supported and feature a unique Challengers points system on a per-player basis, giving competitors a chance to get scouted by CDL teams. So we looked at games that are under intense levels of control, but now let's take a look at a couple examples of games that highlight the more grassroots scene. Games like The Finals, a rocky launch in December of 2023 with a huge player base that suddenly disappeared overnight. Despite that initial setback, the game kept chugging along as the hardcore players who fell in love with the game's incredible gunplay, destruction, and pacing did not give up on the game. And while Embark Studios initially had no plans for a formal esports scene, tournament organizers were quick to begin hosting community-driven events within weeks of launch. I myself was heavily involved with every single one of these events. Small-scale tournaments emerged on platforms like Faceit and community Discord servers, and even though the competitive scene was pretty small, it did not stop the community from running the competitive events that it wanted. And with grassroots momentum like this, Embark Studios eventually gave in to what the community wanted, with Twitch Rivals in 2024 and a plan for a $100,000 major in 2025. That hopefully I'm also casting, by the way. We might actually be getting a real-time view at what it looks like when grassroots communities evolve into mixed ecosystems. The best example of grassroots esports is by far the FGC. Everything in the fighting game community is very bare bones. There's not a lot of support from the bigger brands. From Street Fighter to Smash Bros to Mortal Kombat and Tekken, you don't usually see multi-million-dollar events with closed qualifiers. In the FGC, everyone is grinding to build up different tournaments to give back to the community. The FGC has held a "we have to make this work ourselves" mentality for decades now. Now, that doesn't mean that big-ticket international events don't exist, though. EVO is the holy grail of events in the FGC, and it was fully community-driven until Sony purchased it a few years back. This purchase was actually a mixed bag for the community, though. On the positive side of things, now a mega corporation can bring in more money and sponsors. But with the downside being that for the FGC as a whole, it felt like a main part of their pride had to be let go because it was no longer grassroots. In the 2020s, we've seen some changes to the FGC. A Street Fighter $1 million event sponsored by Capcom, another $1 million event at the Esports World Cup, and more high-price events starting to take place across different titles. This makes it harder for grassroots esports tournaments to keep up. But uniquely, these big name events happening has not changed the greater FGC, because the culture is so strong that many of the big name pro players just want to stay in it for the sake of the game. The FGC as a whole sticks together and has the most community events per capita across any esports scene. There's at least one major FGC broadcast every night of the week, and it's such a tight-knit community that even across different tournament leagues, you'll see the same casters and players. But there's still tons of room for new talent. Accessibility is the name of the game, and the mentality is just different in the FGC. So that explains the differences and some history behind all the different types of esports ecosystems. But why are all of these formats so completely different? And which is more successful? To be honest with you, this question is something that could be researched at a PhD level. But there are some clear answers here too. For starters, the success of the game itself is wildly important context. There's a reason that Embark Studios didn't adopt a franchise model for the finals, for example. The game is successful, of course, but it's not operating at the same level as League of Legends or Call of Duty, yet at least. One can dream. But a developer like Activision, that has billions of dollars, has the capital to front for franchise models like OWL and CDL. But then we have the question of, do franchise models as a whole work at all? And why did OWL fail but CDL didn't? Even if CDL is still struggling in the same way. But there's already some great video essays explaining that topic. In my opinion, it's clear that franchise models are slowly becoming a thing of the past. With Overwatch and Valorant taking over the open qualifiers into partnership model, I think it's safe to say for right now that this is becoming the new norm, at least for team-based shooters. That being said, only time will tell what games like Marvel Rivals and Fragpunk end up doing with their ecosystems, or if they end up trying to go for a more closed-off Fortnite model. But what about grassroots ecosystems? Is it a good thing that most esports seem to be getting treated just as importantly as the games themselves? I think the most important deciding factor when it comes to the viability of grassroots esports is the culture surrounding the games and genres themselves. Looking at the FGC and how things are evolving, even with multi-million-dollar tournaments happening at higher frequencies, it still doesn't stop the world champions from staying in their small groups and playing weeklies against new kids showing up at LAN for the first time. I don't think that culture can exist in a team-based FPS, because the greater expectations of the community are far different. You don't see a CDL team who just won $1 million playing in a $2,000 weekly tournament, when prize pools of $10,000, $50,000, and even $100,000 being normal in FPS. The majority of the pro FPS player base and its viewers don't care about the $1,000 tournaments. Okay, so if grassroots isn't the move, then why don't all games adopt an official esports ecosystem at launch? Well, let's look at the finals again. The main reason that the finals didn't adopt its own esports ecosystem off the rip has to do with the context on the publisher side of things. During the development of the finals, the esports industry was in a recession of its own. Coming out of the pandemic, there were concerns if the entire esports industry would collapse in on itself or not. And it was the same situation with XDefiant, where concerns about the esports industry as a whole led the developers and publishers to just shift focus on the game itself. Compare this to Riot, who was already well known from League of Legends by the time Valorant was due for release, and Valorant releasing at the best possible time in the pandemic, arguably the height of esports up until now. With LoL esports being the most popular esports ecosystem in the world to that point, it's a no-brainer that Riot could launch a complicated esports model with Valorant and see success. A smaller studio like Embark wouldn't have that same runway to dive off of. Comparatively, even if the finals retained the 1 million players they had at launch, a partner system would not make sense just on the topic of scale. Games like Counter-Strike developed in a completely different era, not only in gaming, but economically as well, back when it was financially feasible to run community-driven tournaments on extremely large scales, and before esports was as mainstream as it is now. It's the same story with the FGC and the EVO tournament series. Many of the trends that we see in esports are products of the time that the game released in, whereas now, publishers and developers are seeing the potential to create structured ecosystems that can actually generate revenue. In the 2010s, they thought that that would be through franchise models, and in the second half of the 2020s, seeing the success of Valorant and Fortnite, who embraced esports compared to titles like The Finals and XDefiant in 2024, developers and publishers are realizing that an inbuilt esports ecosystem is a valid use of the marketing budget, but only time will tell as to which ecosystem format takes hold for new titles. It's a complicated answer for a complicated topic, but grassroots esports isn't going anywhere. Even if by the end of the decade, all esports leagues are controlled by the developers and publishers, That won't stop small dedicated communities and local venues from wanting to build something that's both accessible and close to home. Personally, I think that in the second half of the 2020s, we'll see grassroots tournament organizers have a comeback and a real place in the esports industry. But with games like Marvel Rivals adopting a similar built-in model to Valorant and Fortnite, where qualifiers are built into the main menu of the game, only time will tell if the grassroots era of esports has truly come to an end. What makes a successful esports model is a dense combination of a game's popularity to generate profit for the developers and viewers for its competitive player base. Viewers and fans are the end-all be-all for esports. Individuals who actively support the players, teams, and leagues by watching, interacting, attending, and even buying merch to rep their favorite team or player. For many viewers, there's more satisfaction in wearing an esports jersey for their favorite organization, while for others, it's going to see your favorite pro player compete at a local tournament. As the culture shifts around esports, it has to shift around the needs of the community, both its viewers and its players. And that is going to look wildly different if your game is car soccer, Counter-Strike, or hot ladies and tentacles.
Holy walnuts, buy me a ticket.
At the end of the day, if the developers and publishers take control, they need to really understand what kind of financial model will not only work to support those at the top, but also players who want to get to the top. You can't have a successful top line without a healthy pool of tier 2 talent to promote. This video didn't even talk about esports teams and organizations, so be on the lookout for another video on that soon. If you like this video, make sure to subscribe, like, and comment to help me grow throughout my new content journey. Thanks for watching, and don't worry, you'll see me around.